Just the significance of that win was huge yesterday, and very, very impressive. And it's been well spoken about the amount of injuries they had, and they were kind of down to the bare bones.
It's easy enough to let that seep into all the talk about the injuries, to seep into the players and to seep into the management group, and to just kind of have a little bit of an excuse built in. But they didn't. They dug in. They kept digging.
Yeah, and they actually played very well after conceding that early score, which is a bit of a hammer blow. And you always ask about whether the French will settle and what kind of mentality they have. So they get an early try and you think, whoa, this is dangerous now. Connacht, where they were the week before, getting walloped by Leinster, and will they fold? And they didn't, to be fair. And sometimes out of desperation, obviously, you're going to react, and that reaction... But that's down to good man management from Andy Friend as well, trying to instill a bit of belief in the players, and particularly in the bad weeks. Sometimes it's easy coach on the good weeks because things run smoothly, and it's the bad weeks where your head coach needs to get inside the players' heads really, and the group, and make them believe again, because no matter what you've done or achieved in the past at any level, if you get a big beating like that, you've got to find a way to come out of it, and that's what's so impressive. And given they had more injuries, Jared Butler, Adi Olokan, Matt Healy pulling out before, so it was a tough psychological week for him, you know, and then to have a team so strong with so many stars as Montpellier. So it was very, very impressive. I thought Robin Copeland was brilliant, Caelan Blade, Dennis Buckley playing the 80 minutes. You know, when you think of the size of the props he's up against, to go through that, and we don't see that with props as much anymore.
Ever really?
No, Bundyaki was brilliant. He played really, really well, tackles, carries. So it was brilliant to see, and they could have scored more tries. And I think the try just before half-time was really, really significant, and that gave them instilled that belief and confidence. So they had to work incredibly hard, lost a lot of collisions, and physically they were under the pump at times, but their reaction was just superb. And it's the standout performance of the weekend. I did the Bath Ulster game on Saturday, and I thought Bath would probably be just a little bit too strong, and it's a tough place to go, the recreation ground in Bath, and I thought Ulster just really showed grit and determination and quality as well to kind of control that and get that performance. But Connacht's game is the standout performance.
We should talk about Jacob Stockdale though, and his last gasp defensive save against Bath to win the game. It was pretty sensational. It
was, for anyone who's not seen it. Zach Mercer's clean through, 2-on-1 with Will Allison, and he just hesitates a little bit. Rocca the Goonie is on his outside, and Stockdale just tracks back after going ahead of the pass initially. Rocca the Goonie gets in behind him and Mercer, and he just gets back and intercepts it on the way back, and saved the day. Yeah, saved the day, and it was a huge moment for him, obviously, because that was the match. I think Zach Mercer just hesitated a little bit, but I thought Ulster deserved the win because physically they really fronted up. They lost Jack McGrath early in the game, then Sam Carter went off as well with a shoulder problem. So you take two of your forwards out like that early on, away from home. Alan O'Connor did a great job when he came on, and Eric O'Sullivan. So it was a very, very impressive win. Jack Carty was superb throughout the whole game. Or John Cooney, apologies. John Cooney.
Apart from shanking the right in front of the goals penalty.
Well, that was well, look,
that aside,
that can happen any kicker. But he just does so much with his tactical kicking, his box kicking, his kicking out of hand. He was just really, really brilliant. Got a great try as well. So it's a big result for them because, for me, having been in Europe and been successful at Munster and kind of been in semi-finals and finals and eventually winning it, you've got to be winning these away games to measure your progress. And, given what Ulster did last year and should have probably won that quarter-final against Leinster in Dublin, they've now started their campaign really brightly. They've got Clermont at home next Friday night, so that's going to be incredibly difficult. But
at least,
yeah, they're full of energy now, and these away wins in Europe can be massive for a team.
Even in the context of Stockdale, like you talk about that quarter-final last year, what happened to him that day, dropping the gimme of a try, and then he comes back, and perhaps his year has kind of come a little bit full circle at this point. It has been a very, very tough 2019.
Yeah,
for him.
he didn't have his best game on Saturday, and it wasn't that he made mistakes, but he just didn't get a lot of the ball, and there was a few box kicks that you'd like to see him being a bit more aggressive in the air with. Rocket the Gooney's a really, really tricky player to play against, and he stepped Jacob Stockdale once or twice and sat him on his backside another time where he ran straight back. But a moment like that can kind of change the mindset a little bit, and you know, when players are running over, patting you in the back, and you can walk off the field. So it is a big contrast from. We know his attacking ability is outstanding, but I think the things he needs to work on and develop now are his aggression in the air, his physicality when he doesn't have the ball and stuff like that. But that was a big moment for him.
Will Ulster be concerned with their defence? There was a couple of times and it was like one-on-one tackles were just not there.
Well, I think the big one was the Will Addison missed tackle. That was, he just got sat down a little bit, and it allowed Bath back into the game just
straight away,
after
they
they
just scored a
scored.
try, yeah.
They just scored. So overall, I just thought their energy and aggression was very, very good.
Okay,
And
so
their work
occasionally
rate-
that happens.
Yeah,
and you get away with
a little bit, you know, I think. But I thought it was a really, really good defensive effort, Ger, from them. They were very, very physical. Bath like to play from deep, and I think sometimes the Gallagher Premiership can put them in a false sense of security because they had a great win the week before. They have a lot of attacking players, and Rocket Gooney, Jamie Joseph, McConaughey, you know, they're very, very dangerous players, and you want to try and get the ball to them. So they try to move it a lot, and I just think they got caught being a bit lateral, and Ulster's aggression and their physicality was really, really impressive. And they fronted up, you know, you've got to front up. These is like cup rugby, you know,
Yeah.
and they did that extremely well.
I was interested in how Sam Underhill played. What did you think?
Didn't feature at all.
Just looked like
It's
somebody.
amazing, yeah, it's amazing. And it's very, very difficult, you know, for him to come back from the World Cup. I thought Ulster just nullified him at the breakdown. And when you think like a Bath team that are full strength would have probably a back row of Francois Lowe and Underhill and Falatau.
That's it.
It's not a bad back row. But Underhill came back and they started him, and it's not that he had a bad game, but we didn't see a lot of him. He looked tired, he looked fatigued.
Jet-lagged.
At one stage when Will Addison kicks the ball through for Rob Little's try, he just looks like he looked tired running back there, you know, and it can happen, the highs of the World Cup, but as I said, it was a fantastic start for Ulster.
He was in with the shout of player of the tournament if they'd backed
Yeah,
up the
yeah, for
semi-final
sure, yeah.
performance or the final performance. Certainly he would have been in that shortlist for World Player of the Year and all that kind of stuff that comes with having an amazing World Cup. So I've no doubt that it's going to be hard for some of them to recover. In terms of Munster's performance of the weekend, we talked about how difficult it's going to be to learn that much from games against the Ospreys. But at the same time, you've got to go and do your business. How did the team perform and who did their business?
Well, the end result was the bonus point, and that was, I think that was a minimum requirement given the team that the Ospreys selected and had. They're missing their internationals, and Alan Wynne-Jones, Tipuric, Watkin, George North, all these guys, top-class players who would obviously make the Ospreys way stronger. They've been on a terrible run, so you think, right, Munster have all their internationals back. I know Joey Carberry isn't there, but they look strong. It's a strong team on paper, and you think, without being disrespectful, that they've got to go for the bonus point win here, not just the win. And they struggled at times. I think their forwards played well. They had a lot of possession, a lot of carries. But it is difficult, and the mitigating factor here is you're playing against a team who are being lambasted at the moment. Alan Clark said it last week, they're bottom of the pit. A lot of players playing for the futures. Will they get another contract? Will they be released? Where are they going? So they can make it difficult for you. And that's what they did. They made it incredibly difficult. But I think if Munster look back and analyse it honestly themselves, they were sloppy at times. They probably kicked the ball away on occasions when they should have held on to the ball. They were a little bit static in some of their carries. But then there was moments of sheer dominance and energy and aggression and forward momentum at times. But I just think that, you know, I think the Jeremy Loughman pass sums up maybe a change in mindset, and maybe the only kind of blueprint we would have seen from maybe Stephen Larkham, when they get the turnover, the ball comes loose and his first reaction is to pass, to give a 20-metre pass to Chris Farrell, and then he takes on the fringe defence and puts Andrew Conway away, and they scored a third try, which was really, really crucial at the time. Maybe before, if a prop picks up the ball in midfield, he's head down.
Yeah.
So it was hard to see, and the question people keep asking is, and they want to see some sort of change in approach, is Stephen Larkham's blueprint. And it was difficult on Saturday, and I know they will look back and say, I think the Ospreys were very conscious of putting a lot of bodies across the field. They didn't get sucked in too much, but, you know, Munster's forward dominance, I thought they should have been a little bit more comfortable than relying on an 84th minute try to give him that kind of optimum result of the bonus point win.
Loughman ended up making a lot of carries though at the same time.
He was very good, Jim. He was very good.
And I mean the way Munster played last season, and if you had some criticism of them last season, it was a lack of width, or it was a lack of
and to be
adventure.
fair to them on, they were trying to move the ball a little bit, but I just think at times it was there was no great incision there, and you know, their energy levels were up and back and forward and back, and they still look, obviously it's very, very early in the season, and this group of players, you know, they've only come back in last week against Ulster, so you can't be too critical of them. But I just think there were opportunities, and there was times where they probably kicked the ball away. But the Ospreys made it difficult from with a bit of an umbrella defence, trying to shut them off on that kind of 13 channel. But
you've got to assume that, like, the players who were at the World Cup have had almost no contact hours with Larkham, so they're still working a little bit off last season's template.
Of course.
There's a few meetings, they try to do stuff, and so you know, I think if Sam Underhill has a bit of a hangover, I've no doubt so many of those Irish players have a bit of a hangover too.
Yeah, there's no doubt. It's still going to be tricky. I think there'll be. I think I've said this a couple of weeks ago, that the contrast of a high in a World Cup like the South African players, it's re-motivating yourself to kind of go again after that, and then sometimes when you have the low, like some of the Irish players, you want to get back going again. You have a determination to prove that you can still play and that you want to show yourself in a good light again. So it takes a while for everybody. It takes a while to get back on track. And I think, you know, so there was a lot of positive signs from Munster. They were, like, in fairness, but I just think if they came away from the Liberty Stadium on Saturday without the bonus point win, it would have been...
It was hangover territory.
Yeah, it would have been. They would have been disappointed players walking off the field, and I have a lot of sympathy for the Ospreys. You know, financially they've been really restricted. They've lost players. I just don't know if an Irish province would ever do it. We have the rest periods for our internationals. I'm not really sure why they did this now. Maybe they looked at the groups and said, look, well,
We can't get out anyway.
Yeah, but I think it's a decision from the national team that the national players are to be rested for a number of weeks. But if you're an Ospreys fan and you're not seeing Adam Wynne-Jones and Tipperick and Watkin and George North,
Yeah. Look, maybe
Gareth
around Six
Anscombe is
Nations.
injured. Yeah, I know. Maybe, yeah.
Far away, but Wales always seem to value the international team more than the provinces. And look, we obviously do as well. So, but yet all our players were back.
Yeah, I just think they're 4 to 6 weeks off, all the players are getting. And look, it'll benefit them in the back end of the year with Wales and stuff like that, and maybe for Six Nations, but they probably could have found more rest periods in the next couple of months,
Yeah.
given in the Pro 14 than,
Especially because
than
they're
resting
just-
players in Europe.
They're just at peak fitness, surely. Like, they've come through a World Cup cycle. And
Yeah, it's not as if they're completely fatigued now.
Yeah.
That's your point, and that's 100% relevant. They're not fatigued now. It's just they're giving them a rest now to make sure that they can last out the season. Give them the rest during the Pro 14 periods. I just thought it was crazy. I just think you've got to play your best players in Europe. Whether you're in a tough group and you may not come out of the group or not, I just think it was it was a shame that happened on Saturday. It was good from a Munster point of view because they didn't probably have to overextend themselves or be incredibly accurate or. But they got
a gentle introduction to the season for them.
Yeah, it was
the European season. From Leinster's perspective, it was fairly bloodless. The main thing was that Quinlan went off very early, so we didn't actually get to see exactly what he's going to be like. Started the game at number 8.
Yeah, and it was an interesting selection, wasn't it, ahead of Max Deegan? I'm sure he's not too pleased that he wasn't starting, but he's a very good player, Quinlan Doris. And I think Leinster overall, again, it's when you come up against a team that you're probably expected to get the bonus point win, sometimes it can happen. We haven't seen it that often with Leinster because they've probably shown a ruthless edge and a bit more clinical than most teams and their consistency in the last couple of years. But Benetton made it very, very difficult for them and frustrated them a lot. And Leinster had to defend for periods in the game, which is significant as well, and you can take a lot out of that. But Gary Ringrose not out of huge individual creativity, but just really good footwork and an ability to find gaps and holes, score 3 tries. And
O'Driscoll-esque.
Yeah, I know. It's he's an incredible talent, and we know he can do that. And I think that'll be massive for him.
I mean, I thought almost nobody emerged from the World Cup with credit, but like he certainly played to. Got himself back in the team, and there was no doubt that he was a first choice centre at the end of that tournament for Ireland. That like all of the bits, is it going to be Farrell and Henshaw? Is it Bundyaki +1? It's Ringrose +1, I would say, going forward.
I still think Chris Farrell has a say in I just think he offers a huge amount. I'm a massive fan of Gary Ringrose, and I think he probably. I think that the attack, and definitely if we want our attack and our approach around attack to be a little bit different, he's your number 1 choice. And then you're thinking of Aki, Henshaw and Farrell maybe, who plays 12.
We can do a depth chart soon enough.
Yeah, more depth charts again, Jesus. But
for 4 years.
Yeah, it was good to see Gary Ringrose.
No, we just jinxed everybody. They all get injured.
Yeah, okay. Sorry, one last thing about Leinster before we go. Ronan Kelleher scored another try. He's a try-scoring machine. I mean, the calls to get him in the Ireland setup, in the Ireland team as opposed to setup, are going to be deafening sooner rather than later.
Well, I think he's now the starting choice hooker for Ireland and
For Leinster.
And I think he has to be in the mix in the next while. There's a squad get-together before Christmas, and I've no doubt he will be there now, and he looks very accomplished player, and he's had his injuries in the last couple of years, but hopefully he can stay injury-free because he's such a dynamic player, and still a little bit to learn for sure, and that'll be tested in the next couple of weeks. They're away in Lyon next week, so that'll be a different proposition for any of those young players. So it's, but again, scoring another try, and just the lines are running, and his dynamic impacts around the field are very, very impressive.
Not an easy opening weekend for Ronan O'Gara's La Rochelle either.
Yeah, and I spoke to him the other day after he was on here in the morning, and I just thought it's probably when we speak about World Cups and players coming back and getting a little bit of continuity and momentum going here in the Irish provinces, it's even more trickier in France when guys are coming back from the World Cup, because getting them up to speed and getting back in the system seems to be a little bit more difficult, and I suppose the inconsistent performances of any of the teams in the top 14 while the World Cup was on. It's hard to judge the teams, and your worst possible opponent coming to your place is one of them is Exeter, because they're so well drilled under Rob Baxter, they're so organised, they're intense, their work rate is through the roof, and if there's any chinks in your armour, they'll expose them with that intensity and that work rate and stuff. And they did that, and it was a really disappointing game. When you're losing home games in Europe, it's not good.
I saw the pre-match build-up and the bit before, so everybody in the crowd was waving their flags, and it looked like it was all set for a big atmosphere.
Yeah, and the atmosphere there, and to be fair to La Rochelle, in the last couple of years, they've had big wins in Europe, but that's. I know Ron. I wasn't speaking to him since, but I'm sure he'd be very, very disappointed with that result.
31-12 was the final score there, and they La Rochelle 12 came with the last minute try as well, which they converted. So a bit of a paddling. And Exeter probably are one of those teams who are going to feel like they have a sense of mission.
And can they go a step further, because they've probably underachieved in Europe in the last number of years, Exeter. Are they a team that can push on and get to a semi-final or a final? Potentially. They're good enough on paper anyway.
One last thing that we should talk about this morning is Israel Folau, who is back in the news this morning. So I woke up this morning and was like, politicians condemn Israel Folau over bushfire comments. Like, I wonder what he could possibly have said. So I don't know if you know, but Australia, very serious fires, bushfires raging. And apparently it's God's judgment for the legalisation of same-sex marriage and abortion. So God is punishing Australia with these fires for the things that they've done. And so, funnily enough, everybody has said, shouldn't have said that, Israel, because, pretty bad thing to say.
There's a fine line here from him, from the media publishing this stuff, because the reality is he's standing up in his church and probably speaking in front of 30, 40 people, saying this stuff, and it's been put up on Facebook, and then it's been picked up by the media, and then there's articles being written about it, and it's on the mainstream news. So it's out there. And some people say, well, don't give it airtime, but it's out there now again. And I just think it's becoming sad at this stage, Ger, because this guy is obviously completely deluded. It's shocking bullshit that he's continuously preaching to people. Some will argue again that it's him just preaching in his church, but they know it's going to get out. He knows it's going to get out. And I would say now, aside from believing any of this stuff, he's damaging his case against Rugby Australia now, even more so. And I don't think he'll ever win that case anyway about the unfair dismissal. And people talk about free speech. Well, if this is free speech, it's crazy stuff. It's crazy speech. It's not free speech. And it was the same as his comments about homosexuality and people going to hell and all that stuff. I never agreed with any of that. I think it is, he's saying it's out of love.
It's not, it's out of hate.
It's not. You know, there's people who have died here. There's people who have perished here. There's people who have lost their homes here in Australia. And he's saying it's God's way of punishing people for Australia legalising same-sex marriage. Jesus, did you ever hear such crap in all your life? It's absolute rubbish. And I think there's no way back for this guy now.
Hopefully.
There is, yeah, hopefully. And you know what? We don't want to kind of get involved in the hate kind of scenario or hate campaign, but I just think, like, it's such a sad story. This guy is one of the greatest rugby players Australia have ever produced. Such an incredible talent. Because he is told on one stage, stop posting stuff, homophobic tweets. He does it again. He agrees not to do it, does it again. Then he gets his contract terminated. And now he's missed out on the World Cup. He's missed out on continuing his sporting career. And I've said this from the start, I don't mind if you believe stuff, you know, it's just, and you're a role model and you're a sports person and use a social media platform to say these things, well, you're risking the wrath of people you offend. There's no problem believing stuff and keeping it to yourself or keeping it quiet. And there is an argument to say that, look, this stuff is going on in the church, but they know it's getting out. They're pushing it out onto Facebook, his speeches.
It was published on Facebook. The sermon was published on Facebook.
You know, so it's not as if it's
he's
a private ceremony.
He's trying to amplify that message because he's trying to rally people behind that message.
Absolutely. And
because there are people out there who believe that.
Like, I just think the people who stood up for him now, the politicians and the high-profile other sports people in Australia, there's a minority of them that's backed him and stood up for him and said it was free speech.
Hopefully they're abandoning
should
it now.
See now that this is crazy speech. It's not free speech, and it's offensive to anyone now who's lost loved ones in the bushfires in Australia. It's just absolute rubbish and crap, and it's mind-boggling, to be honest.
All right, we'll leave it there.